We're going to be in Genesis chapter 49 today. We're going to take the whole chapter. Next week, we will finish out Genesis with chapter 50. And then just so you know the game plan, on Sunday the 17th and then Sunday the 24th, which happens to be Christmas Eve, we will be in the Gospel of Luke and doing some very Christmassy type things. So I'm looking forward to that. So today, 49. I yesterday was on a walk and saw something that was just, it was kind of fun, put a big smile on my face. It was really cute. I watched a little girl that was lived in a house on Country Club Drive, and she was out in the street, and I mean little, like she was probably this tall, and she had on like pink rain boots, and she was wearing a purple raincoat. She had purple like ear protection things on, not earmuffs, but like for noise, and she had a small leaf blower, like a child-size leaf blower. And she was in the street blowing up the leaves, like blowing them, getting them off the street. And she just had the biggest smile on her face and was just so excited. And, the leaves were just blowing and blowing and blowing with this leaf blower that was about this big. Why? Because her dad was standing behind her with a huge leaf blower, right? And so she's just there blowing these leaves, thinking she's doing all this great stuff, and her dad is just back there. He's doing it all. And he also just had this big smile. And it was such a cool illustration of just a father and his child, a father really out there spending time with his kid, blessing his daughter, and really the father being the one out there doing all the work at the same time. As we dig into Genesis 49, this is the second half of a sermon on blessings, and really it has a lot to do with that kind of illustration at the beginning. We're in a part of the Bible at the end of Genesis where we're reading about Jacob the patriarch. All throughout the Bible, God is called the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is at the end of Jacob's lives. As we read this chapter, he is in his bed. He is sitting on the edge of his bed, and he has gathered his 12 sons around him, and he is going to give them blessings. Now, as we get into this, I want to explain something about this passage. The words will be on the screen, but there's something that you won't be able to see with the words on the screen. If you were to open up a Bible and look at this chapter, you're going to see that the wording starts with one typesetting and then shifts to another typesetting. Why? The Bible is made up of different literary books, different genres of literature. And you read and study different genres in different ways. There's a lot of the Bible that is narrative. Genesis, most of it is narrative, meaning that it is a story being told, right? You sit around a campfire and tell stories. That's what Genesis is like. That's what you see in parts of Exodus. You go to Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. You go on down, and a lot of the Old Testament is narrative. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Acts are narratives. They're stories. You interpret those one way, but other parts of the Bible say are epistles. All of Paul's writings are epistles. They're letters being written. And so you read and study and interpret a letter different than a story. A lot of the Bible is written in poetry. And in poetry, you really study things differently. Not everything in poetry is what it says directly. So like you go to the Song of Solomon, and it's in poetic form. And he's describing the beauty of his love and describes her in ways that, quite frankly, are really odd and mushy and gross, right? That's what is going on in this section. We're going to move from narrative storytelling, and in a Bible, you will see the typeface change, and suddenly you realize we are reading for most of this chapter poetic prophecy. It is a poem, and it is prophetic. A lot of the Old Testament is that way. In fact, one of the largest books in the Old Testament is the book of Isaiah. It is written in poetic form, and it is prophetic. So I'm feeling really proud right now because first service, I could not say poetic and prophecy correctly. I was totally messing those words up. And then the more I talked, the more other P words started coming out. It was, I don't know, something weird going on with me. But this thing is poetic, it is prophetic, and I think that is important for us to realize because what is going to happen is Jacob is going to look at his 12 sons. He's going to pronounce blessings and curses upon them. But they're not necessarily everything he says directed at that son he is looking at. A lot of times it is about the tribe that son represents. You have 12 sons, 12 tribes of Israel. I almost thought instead of putting the words on the screen today, of actually putting up a map of ancient Israel with where the 12 tribes were, because this prophecy has a lot to do with that and beyond. But the words will be on the screen, and I just wanted to give us that kind of idea about what we're reading as we get into it. I'm going to take the first 4 sons, and we'll go slow and talk about them, speed up in the middle, and slow down at the end again. So here we go. Genesis 49, starting at verse 1. Then Jacob called his sons, and he said, "Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you what shall happen to you in the days to come." Typeset changes. "Assemble and listen, O sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel, your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the first fruits of my strength. Preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch." Huh? What's going on here? You look at this is Reuben, he's the firstborn. According to their culture, he should have been given a double blessing, and he should be the one who ends up in charge of the family. After Jacob dies, he would have been the patriarch. And this blessing starts out incredible. You can imagine, as Reuben starts to hear this, how he gets a smile on his face and is like, yeah, I mean, those words, you're my firstborn. Today is our firstborn's 31st birthday, right? And there's just something special about that firstborn. There's something special. Although we know the youngest in the family is the best. I'm just kidding. I only said that because my sister's here. Yeah, you look at it, there's something special about that firstborn. Reuben, you're my firstborn. You're my might. The first fruits of my strength. You're preeminent in dignity, preeminent in power. Sounds good, right? But you are as unstable as water. And you're not going to have preeminence. And there's this confrontation that takes place. Why? Because, Reuben, you went and you slept with one of my wives. That was a little passage we read earlier in Genesis, where Reuben went and slept with one of his stepmothers. And he never repented from that. So what you have here starting out is this blessing that in a lot of ways turns into a curse. And we read about it later. It's even found in 1 Chronicles Chapter 5, verses 1 to 2. The writer of Chronicles says this: the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's couch, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph and the son of Israel, so that he could not be enrolled as the oldest son. Though Judah became strong among his brothers and a chief came from him, yet the birthright belonged to Joseph. Reuben, he never repented from that sin. And at this time, it's amazing because Jacob isn't saying, you are no longer my son. What he is saying is, you are my son, but that unrepented sin is what is stopping you from experiencing the blessing that could have been yours. Got that? The unrepentant sin is what is stopping Reuben from experiencing the blessing he could have experienced. Next, we read this, verse 5. These two are always together, these two brothers. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul come not into their counsel. O my glory, do not be not joined to their company. For in their anger they killed men, and in their willfulness they hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Whoa! Verse 3, sons, and so far, amazing blessings, huh? Why? These two sons were sons, but because of their unrepented sin, they were not going to experience the full blessings that could have been theirs from the Father. What happened? This is the one chapter we skipped in Genesis, and I just skipped over it just because of age appropriateness. It's a chapter that is one of the most real chapters in all the Bible. Jacob had a daughter, and basically she was assaulted by a man in revenge. Simeon and Levi made a deal with this man that he could have their sister as his wife if every man in their town was circumcised. So they did that, and the Bible says 3 days later, while all the men were still groveling in pain, Simeon and Levi went in and murdered every man in an entire town. They didn't just take revenge on the one who committed the crime. They murdered all of these men, never repented. And so they were not able to participate in the full blessings that could have come from their father. What does it mean that they will be divided in Jacob and scattered in Israel? Well, when you look at the tribes of Israel, if you were to look on a map, you're going to see the tribe of Simeon. And what you'll notice is the southern half of Israel is mainly the tribe of Judah. You'll see the tribe of Judah with Benjamin just kind of wedged in right on the northern side of it. And then almost in the middle of the tribe of Judah is this little spot called Simeon. They were completely surrounded by the largest and most powerful tribe. And it didn't take long before they were just absorbed into it. They were just absorbed. It's not unlike when you go to Portland today. When you go to Portland, you're going to go to different districts, right? There's the Hollywood district, the Hawthorne district. There's Multnomah Village. All of those different places used to be their own individual towns. But as Portland grew around them, what happened? They just got absorbed into it and just became part of Portland, right? That is what happened with Simeon. So originally, there was a tribe of Simeon, and that tribe had land, but it didn't take long at all before they were just gone and not even talked about anymore. Levi, if you look at a map, is there anywhere in the tribes that's called Levi? No. They didn't get a land allotment like the other ones. So they were scattered amongst all the other tribes. But the tribe of Levi served the Lord in a very unique way, and therefore got a different type of blessing. You go to Exodus, there's the story of Moses going up Mount Sinai, and while he is up there, he receives the Ten Commandments. When he comes down Mount Sinai with the tablets, he looks and he sees that Aaron has made for the Israelites a golden calf, and that they're no longer worshiping Yahweh. Instead, they are worshiping an idol. Moses gets so angry, he takes those tablets, he throws them down and shatters them. And he goes down and he says, "Who will stand with me?" There was one tribe that stood with him. Which tribe? His own tribe, the Levites. And he said, "Put on your sword. We're defending the Lord." And because they stood with Moses for the worship of Yahweh, who would save them, God pronounced a different blessing on them, that they would become the priests, and the Levitical families would be the musicians, the servants in the temples, and that they would have several cities or towns that would be theirs, scattered throughout the rest of Israel. So far, what we're seeing is not so much blessing, it's a lot of curse, but things that happened both right then and there with the family, but things that also happened later on in time. The next one is verse 8, with the fourth son. And this is a mighty one. "Judah, your brother shall praise you." Incidentally, the word in Hebrew praise sounds almost exactly like the name Judah. All right? So, praise, your brother shall praise you. Or Judah, your brother shall Judah you. Judah, your brother shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down. He crouched as a lion. And as a lioness, who dares to rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he has washed his garments in wine, and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. Whenever I take us through a book of the Bible, I read a lot of different commentaries, books written by scholars who study all this out. With Genesis, there has been one that I've been using a lot. It's a book written about the first 5 books of the Bible. It's a Jewish translation by a scholar named Everett Fox. He's not a Christian, he's a Jewish scholar, a Hebrew scholar. And when it comes to chapter 49, Everett Fox just says flat out, like, this is a really hard passage to translate. And this section of Judah that we just read might be one that is the most difficult, not necessarily based on the words themselves, but based on the theology and the prophetic outcome of this passage. We read it in the ESV, and I want to take just a second to reread this, verse 10 specifically, in some of the other translations, because I don't think the ESV in this instance kind of does justice to this passage. Verse 10 in the NIV says, "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his." Notice the difference. The ESV makes it sound like it could be talking about Judah or somebody else. NIV makes it clear it's talking about somebody else. Some of you maybe grew up with the King James Version. This is what the King James Version says. "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be." Notice it doesn't say he, it says Shiloh. The New American Standard is one of the translations, a modern translation, that it is so literal, trying to keep a word-for-word translation, that a lot of times it's hard to read. In fact, when I was in Bible college, it was before the ESV, that's what I use now. Back then I used the NIV. And the New American Standard people would look at the NIV people and say, "Oh, you're using the NIV, the nearly inspired version." And our response was always yes. And you use the NASB, the Bible like you've never heard it before or wanted to. But again, this is a translation that is very accurate. The scepter will not depart from Judah, will not depart from him, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Why am I highlighting this? Today, most Jewish scholars will interpret this section on Judah very differently than Christians will. Why? Because it's a passage that very clearly points to Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ comes from the line of King David, the mighty King David. When you look at the flag of Israel today, what's on it? The Star of David. King David, the mightiest of their kings, the first of the kings from the tribe of Judah. That is the family of Jesus Christ. And during Jesus' life, in the first century, Jewish rabbis taught this passage we read as a messianic passage that would point to the Messiah. Your brothers shall praise you, and your hand shall be on the neck of their enemies. Your father's son shall bow down before you. It's a passage about a conquering king. Judah, he's a lion's cub. Remember that both King David had this title, and also in the New Testament, it's the title given to Jesus, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He's a lion's cub. So first he's a baby lion. Meow. Next, he's a crouching male lion. One of my grandsons recently, I got a little video of him. He went last week and saw the lions, and the lion was actually just right out, and he's a video of him not on the other side of the glass, but just roaring at this lion. And then he's compared to the lioness, and I like this. Who dares to rouse him? Like as if the author of this is saying, don't stir the mama lion, right? Leave her alone, don't rouse her. The scepter will not depart. That's talking about an eternal kingdom. The obedience of all the peoples will be his. What is this? And why is it that, like what we read today in verse 10, it says, until tribute comes to him, but in other translations it says, Shiloh, not his. Because the word there is Shiloh. It means peace. And older scholars didn't know if it was a description or a name and title. And in the first century, almost every Jewish scholar said it was one of the names or titles of the Messiah who would come. That his title would be peace. Who is Jesus Christ? He is the Prince of what? Peace. This was one of three passages that are very similar and connected that first century Jewish rabbis used together to talk about the Messiah that would come. Today, all three of these passages are reinterpreted by Jewish people that don't want to accept that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. It's the same thing they do to the entire book of Daniel. They say Daniel wasn't actually written by Daniel. Why? Because if Daniel was written by Daniel at the time that Daniel says it was written, you can prove that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. So therefore, they have to say, nope, not written by Daniel. Let me read for you the other two passages that go with this passage in Genesis that talk about the Messiah. The first one is in Numbers chapter 24. It's in a place where the king named Beor, isn't that a great name? Beor. He hires Balaam, the false prophet, to present a curse on the nation of Israel. And it's one of the funniest stories in the Bible because every time Balaam opens his mouth to give a curse, to put a curse on Israel, God won't allow it to happen and instead makes Balaam start giving blessings. And each time the king is like, why'd you just do that? I paid you to curse them, not bless them. Do it again. It happens 3 times. And every time, God won't allow it to happen. This is what we read. And he took up his discourse and said, this is the oracle of Balaam, the son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eye is opened, the oracle of him who hears the words of God and knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty, falling down with his eyes uncovered. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and it shall crush the forehead of Moab and break down the sons of Sheth. Edom shall be dispossessed. Seir also and his enemies shall be dispossessed. Israel is doing valiantly, and one from Jacob shall exercise dominion and destroy the survivors of the cities. Whoa. Interesting. So Balaam's like, I can see one who is coming, but he's not here now. One who is here, but he's not near. So he's seeing into the future. And he talks about this ruler that will come from Judah, from Jacob, and will be represented by a star. Micah 5:2 is the other passage that first century Jewish teachers used in conjunction with the other two to talk about the Messiah. And see if it sounds familiar. Micah 5:2 says, but you, O Bethlehem, Ephrathah, you are too little to be among the clans of Judah. From you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days. Why do those sound somewhat familiar? Well, if you go to the Gospel of Matthew, you're going to read the story of some wise men who recognized that there was a prophecy about a star, and that with that star there was a king that was born in Judah. They went to Jerusalem to talk to the king. And they said, where is this king born, the king of the Jews? The king was angry and plotted. So he called together the first century Jewish teachers and said, "Where is this king born?" And they were able to quote the passage I just read from Micah and say, "Oh, he's in Bethlehem." It's literally quoted in the Christmas story in the Gospel of Matthew. These three passages that were given by Jacob to his son Judah, giving these prophecies about the Messiah that would come, and this is fulfilled in Jesus. I could go on more and more with this, but we don't have enough time. And even reading the rest of these brothers, I don't have the time I wish I could put into this. I'm sure that a lot of doctoral dissertations have been written about this passage. But this points to Jesus Christ being the Messiah. There's even connections. You can look at this passage into Revelation. But for time's sake, let's move on. Some of you are like, "No, keep going, keep going." We have a baptism in the rain, evidently in a bathtub, according to Caesar, that we have to get to. Plus, it's my daughter's 31st birthday, so I have a birthday party to get to today. Verse 13, let's move on. We're going to read several brothers here, and they're not as famous. These tribes aren't as famous. They're the everyman type tribes. Verse 13. Zebulun shall dwell at the shore of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his borders shall be at Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey. Just clarify, donkey in this term is a good thing, all right? You think about it in context of where they are. For these guys, a donkey in our context would be like, Issachar is the top of the line Dodge Ram truck, or if you're a Ford guy, a Ford F-150, or if you're a Toyota guy, he's a Tundra. I don't know, but you get what I'm saying. It's a positive thing. Issachar is a strong donkey, crouching between the sheepfolds. He saw that a resting place was good, and that the land was pleasant. So he bowed his shoulder to bear, and he became a servant at forced labor. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heel so that his rider falls backward. This gets misinterpreted a lot. Some people look at this and they're like, it's saying Dan is like this snake and viper. He's like cunning and stuff like that. No. Dan is the tribe that led Israel into idolatry. Dan is the tribe in the northern kingdom that set up the high places and led the northern tribes into judgment through their idolatry. The fact that he's a serpent and a snake, a viper, is not a good thing. But it's talking about the future. I wait for your salvation, O Lord. Verse 19. Raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid at their heels. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall yield royal delicacies. And Naphtali, he's a doe let loose that bears beautiful fawns. Okay? We get to another big one here in verse 22. Remember last week what I talked about and what I read earlier in the passage from 1 Chronicles, that it was Joseph who received the double honor from his dad, so that Joseph's two sons became the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. But here Joseph will be spoken of, and this prophetic blessing on him is just beautiful. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers bitterly attacked him. They shot at him and harassed him severely, yet his bow remained unmoved, and his arms were made agile. Think about this. What it's saying is that Joseph was attacked in many ways by many enemies. And when you read the story of Joseph, you see a young man who goes from one tragedy to another. But in these poetic, prophetic terms, what is being said is no matter who came at him, he's like an archer who is always steady. His form is perfect. And no matter what happened, his arms were never shaken and he never wavered. I love this. Why? Why? His arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, by the God of your father, whom will help you, by the Almighty, who will bless you with blessings of heaven from above, blessings of the deep that crouches beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of my parents, up to the bounties of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the brow of him who is set apart from his brothers. All right, hang on 1 second. See how polite I was? I muted myself so I didn't cough in your ear. You look at this, and it's just beautiful. Joseph was a son of the father, and he always had a right relationship with the father. So he was able to experience a fullness of blessings that came from the Father. A fullness. Why was he so successful in life? Because God was with him. The last son, Benjamin, is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and at evening dividing the spoil. The tribe of Benjamin, he's the youngest, and we don't read a whole lot about Benjamin. He doesn't say anything in here. But they became a mighty tribe of warriors and fighters. King Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. And most of his men that were with him that were conquering Philistines and doing things were from the tribe of Benjamin. Interesting to note that Benjamin is the only tribe later on that stuck with the tribe of Judah when the Civil War happened. There's so much here I wish I could say. So many different things about this. But let's go ahead and finish out this passage and get to the end of the second to last chapter in Genesis. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father said to them as he blessed them, blessing each with the blessing suitable to him. Then he commanded them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah to the east of Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it were bought from the Hittites. And when Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed, and he breathed his last and was gathered to his people. I'm going to invite the worship team to come up as I close this out. And we will take communion and close out with worship like we normally do. Do me a favor, give me some mood music in the back. Just want some mood music. Here are the two biggest things I just want to point out to you again from this passage. All of these sons were sons of the Father. but the Father gave to them what they earned in their life. One of the things that's said over and over again in our country today in churches is you can't do anything more or less to make God love you more or less. And on one hand, that's true. And on another hand, I question that a lot of times. God loves us. And if we are His children. But what we learn in this story is something about the character of God. Unrepentant sin puts a block in our relationship with Him so that we can't experience the fullness of the blessings He wants to pour out. So brothers and sisters, today when we go to communion, if there's something that you haven't asked for forgiveness from, it's as easy as saying, Lord, you were right, I was wrong. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. The other thing I want to point out, and in studying this, I almost missed this. Jacob is given the prophecy to Dan. He's saying to him, Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heels. That should click with us because at the very beginning of Genesis, there is a curse that is put out and a prophecy. You have Adam and Eve in the garden, you have the serpent. And God says to Eve and to the serpent, I'm going to put enmity between your offspring and the serpent. The serpent will bite the heels, but there will be one that will crush his head. And after Jacob says this, he cries out. It's separate. Verse 18. This is Jacob not giving blessings, but this is Jacob on his deathbed just before he breathes his last. He literally says, I wait for your salvation, O Lord. I wait for your salvation. And what's amazing is the word salvation there is the word Yeshua. That's the name of Jesus. Yeshua. Let that sink in.